Hello everyone, welcome to String and Story. My name is HollyAnne and it's my job to guide you to quilt with confidence. Thank you so much guys for being patient with me this morning. I know that I am almost 5 minutes late. I was attempting to improvise the best way to show you a couple of quilts here behind me today. Now, if you have been with us for the Quilt Your Own Adventure series thus far, then you're going, wait, HollyAnne, like aren't you supposed to be sitting at a sewing machine or something? And typically, yes, that's the plan. However, this week I wanted to show you guys a few examples of the stuff we're talking about, and I'll explain why I'm not quilting these other skinny borders yet here in just a minute. Now, I'm gonna drop you guys down just a little bit because I want you to be able to see more of these quilts. There we go. Good morning, everybody. I see you hopping on. I am going to, solid blocks are your favorite part to highlight. That's really exciting, Janine. Thanks for sharing that. I am going to pop over to Facebook for just a second and click share on this video. I'm going to share it over to the Quilting Rockstars Facebook group. If you are here with me, will you also take a moment and just hit share so that your other quilty friends can see this? And if you have a favorite quilting group that you're a part of, share this video into that group so that more people can come join us and start quilting with confidence. All right, let's see. I'm going to get this over to Quilting Rockstars. Dun, da, da, da. Good morning. Look how many of you are coming and joining us today. Oh, it's so exciting. I love Thursdays. Thursdays are my favorite. Oh my gosh. I woke up this morning, I was like, oh, it's Thursday. Hi, Sam. Hi, Trudy. All right. Get my emoji. You know, gotta get the emoji. All right, so like I said, if you'll take a moment and click share as I'm clicking share, and then I'm gonna open this up. Let me make sure I'm muted down on my computer. Yep. So that I can see your comments a little bit bigger. Well, it's coming. Here we go. Solid blocks are your favorite part to highlight. Hey, Lydia. Hey, Sandy. Katie, Karen, Jody, Janine, Deborah. Oh, look at all of you. Good morning, good morning. All right, so say good morning as you hop on so that we can greet you and see that you're here. Take a moment after you hit share so that your quilty friends will see this. Take a moment and answer the question that's in the caption of this video. This week I asked you about what is your favorite part of a quilt to highlight with your quilting. And I haven't quite decided my answer to this question yet. I think probably my favorite thing to highlight is secondary designs. I'm really, really into secondary designs. So there's my answer for you. Again, you'll be entered to win a copy of my ebook, Anxious to Adventurous, 10 Weeks to Fabulous Free Motion Quilting. And you can treat this ebook as kind of a DIY course, but it also is a great reference. It has a lot of free motion motifs drawn out in it with some pictures of how I've used them on quilts, a little description of how you might use it in your work. And so just it's great to kind of have in your back pocket of like, I'm feeling stumped, not sure what I should quilt on this quilt. Well, let me pull out that ebook and kind of thumb through for some ideas. So make sure you enter to win that by commenting, answering the question in the caption. There's a lot of links in the caption today and we'll hit them as we go along. And I have a big announcement. It's something I've been teasing to you guys for several weeks now. How to make a quilting plan, my most recent evergreen class, so a class that you can purchase on demand anytime and own it forever. How to make a quilting plan is live. I hit publish this morning. It is there waiting for you. So if you've been tuning into these and you're like, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what to quilt where. I look at triangles and I go, I don't know what I quilt there. How do I make these decisions? How do I draft it out? How to make a quilting plan is the class for you. I'm going to show you how to think about what the ultimate goal of your quilt is. Is it a gift? Is it for yourself? Is it for a kid? Is it for the wall? This is a wall hanging, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment, and why I quilted this quilt differently than I do a lot of my quilts, because it was going on a wall, right? You don't have enough experience yet to have a favorite. That is A-okay. Yeah, Lydia, you and me, we're in the secondary design club. I mean, it's just, there's so many possibilities, right? Okay, I'm trying to think. There was something else I was going to tell you guys as we got started, and I'm not sure what it was. Let me look at my caption to see if I can remember. Oh, Judy Trussler, you were our winner last week, and you won a copy of the ebook last week. So if that's you, you can either send me a DM here on Facebook, or you can send me an email at stringandstory@gmail.com so I can get your copy of the ebook over to you. Yay! All right, and as always, there's a link to this week's blog where I've got pictures and written. I'm going to be talking about, you know what? I didn't bring my notebook with me, so I can't hold up quilting plans, but that's okay because they're on the blog and that's more useful for you guys anyway. There's pictures over on the blog. I'll talk through the motifs today, And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have that up as well. All right, so this week we're talking about skinny borders and sashings. And skinny borders and sashings are kind of the transitional words and phrases of your free motion quilting, right? Good morning, Rhoda. And when we're writing, if we say, you know, this is Bob. Bob went to the store. Bob bought milk at the store. Bob went home. Like, that's just incredibly dry to read. But if we jazz that up and we talk about first, Bob went to the store because he'd realized that morning that he was out of milk for his cereal. Bob found the milk and then he went to the checkout counter. After he checked out and paid for his milk, Bob walked home. On the way home, you know, all these little phrases that are connecting those sentences together, those are transitional phrases, right? And they make writing flow. And in the same way, taking time to think about how you quilt things like skinny borders or how you quilt sashings. I'm looking at this like this is going to have sashing. Hey, Gigi. Great to see you, neighbor. Taking time to think through how you're going to quilt those can make a big difference in your quilt. There's one more quilt I want to grab. I think it's in here. Give me just a second, guys. Bear with me. I think I have it. Let's see. Not that one. Oh, maybe I don't. Okay, I was hoping I had one that had proper sashing. There is a photo of proper sashing up on the blog for you guys. You like to develop designs for negative spaces, Sam? Me too. I love that. Okay, so on this quilt, the reason that skinny borders came up is I'm working on this Moda Bake Shop quilt. So this, if you're not familiar, is this summer's Moda Bake Shop Choose Your Own Adventure Camp Oda May Quilt Along, which is like the longest name in the history of ever. But it's a medallion quilt, and each section of the medallion, each border, is separated by its own little skinny border. Now, the designers of this quilt were very brilliant to do this because what that border allowed people to do is measure their quilt as they went along, and if they were a little off from the size it was supposed to be, they could kind of even things up. So this is great, right? But it means that as I'm quilting it, I have to decide how I want to treat these borders. Now, the way that I did this particular quilt, these borders in some form or fashion will lend themselves well to being treated as negative space, right? And some of them I'm going to do that. This border here, which is very hard to see because I used the same fabric as I had used in the star, there's a 1/2 inch border around the center medallion. Oh, I'm pointing down there and you can't even see. Up here. There's a 1/2 inch border there, and I decided to treat that one as negative space, right? And that was a question I got on the blog, is like, how skinny is too skinny to bother quilting? And I would say that it depends on what's going on in the rest of your quilt, right? So if you've got something that's a 1/2 inch like I have here, and I can just kind of suck it into the negative space of the quilt, that might be the best answer. This isn't serving a real purpose as far as visually breaking up space too much, right? It like adds a little extra, but it's not its own color or anything like that. Now, if I had a 1/2 inch sashing in between square blocks, I'm probably gonna wanna do something with that. And here's why. A 1/2 inch, and even an inch, depending on how it is, you know, how long and all of that kind of stuff, you could maybe leave unquilted. But if I have a grid of blocks, let's say that they're 8 inch or 6, let's say 6 inch blocks with little 1/2 inch sashings in between, right? And I could leave those unquilted, but if I'm doing a little bit, Lydia, I like that. If I'm doing fairly intricate quilting or even all over quilting inside the blocks, to leave the sashing unquilted is going to cause it to do this, right? That sashing is visually going to jump out at you. And so then you're taking the really pretty part of your quilt and mashing it down with quilting, and you're letting the kind of less than exciting part of your quilt jump out, right? And you could make an argument for there being a time you want to do that, but probably not, right? The sashing is the transition. It visually is just allowing you to say, oh, here's where one block ends and the next begins. So rather than leaving it unquilted, you might just do a single straight line, you might do a wavy line, you might do a telephone loop. And that's what I've done up here, which is going to be very difficult for y'all to see, but there's a nice close-up photo on the blog, so just trust me. And these skinny borders here, this skinny blue one, and then this skinny coral one over here, they're just kind of beginning the border section of this quilt, right? We're transitioning out of this very swirly background and into some more intricate quilting in these larger borders. So I did a simple telephone loop to keep the amount of quilting consistent. This quilt has a lot of quilting on it. Remember I said it was a wall hanging. So I quilted this hard. This in here, these are, they're micro swirls instead of micro stipples. And while it might be hard to see on video, like this is basically pure thread. So here where it looks almost white, that's actually blue fabric with white thread. And it's unusual from my normal quilting in particular because this is, I don't remember what, it wasn't a poly thread, but it was a non-cotton thread. So you can really feel this thread, right? So because this is so heavily quilted, if I had left these borders unquilted, it would look like I forgot them. So even if a border is really skinny, you don't want to necessarily just write it off, right? You want to think of something to do in that border and that sashing to allow it to transition. Now, let me talk through a few of the ones we talked about on the blog. Remember, in this series, we're doing 3 levels of quilting. Every blog post, as I'm working my way around this quilt, I'm doing an intro level, and that's for those of you who are in my Intro to Free Motion Quilting class. That's my free online class. So if you've not signed up yet and you're sitting here going, this would be great if I knew how to free motion quilt, I got you, okay? Intro to Free Motion Quilting, there's a link in the caption of this video that's stringandstory.com/classes. And every class I'm about to tell you about, you can find at that link. There's like big old signs, so you can't miss them, right? Intro to Free Motion Quilting is a free online class that shows you how to set up your machine, tells you what you need to successfully free motion quilt. It's not as much stuff as you think. Check your tension, and then it teaches you swirls, switchbacks, meander, and loopy meander. So some very basics to get you started, right? So the introductory level of quilting plan in these blogs is going to incorporate those designs plus walking foot lines. So this week I mentioned telephone cord loops, just straight walking foot lines, and then I also mentioned switchbacks, and this is a little bit bigger than a skinny sash, but I brought it up because I wanted to show you guys just what switchbacks can look like as a transition, right? I'm going to hold this up so you can see. And this pattern, by the way, is the Scrappy Table Runner from Kristen Esser's blog, Simple Handmade Everyday. Kristen, if you're on here, will you drop a link to your blog in the comments? And if not, if you want this, there's some links on my blog, but not from today's blog. So send me a DM if you want a link to this pattern. It's a really fun pattern. Scrappy Table Runner, but it allows you to see what switchbacks can look like for texture in between blocks. And here you notice I left these triangles, the only real printy print on here, I left them unquilted because I wanted to let that shine, right? Okay. Then, after the introductory level, we have the moderate level. So this is for those of you who are in beginner free motion quilting. And if you have dabbled with a meander, and you've got kind of the feel of that, and you're like, well, if I want custom quilting, I'll send it out to the long armor. But if it's just for me, if I just need a quick finish, I can meander it myself. If you're ready to take that to the next level, beginner free motion quilting is the class for you. And the really cool thing about beginner free motion quilting is it teaches you 10 motifs, the 4 I already mentioned, plus 6 more, which I'm not going to try to name from memory right now. Sometimes I do that, and then sometimes I mess it up, and we're just going to spare all of us. But it's classic motifs like pebbles and paisleys and ribbon candy. And inside beginner free motion quilting, if you learn those 10 motifs well, you can finish every quilt you ever pieced. So for skinny borders, we talked about things like ribbon candy. This is very classic. And I have some ribbon candy on here. Look, guys, this is the arm of a crib, like the railing of a crib. And I'm going to see if I can pull this close so y'all can see. Here's ribbon candy. Da, da, da. Good. I'm glad there's a laughing emoji. That was the goal here. If I can make you guys laugh on video, I've succeeded for the day. Okay, so ribbon candy. And then, well, I grabbed the quilt with square spirals on it, and now I'm not sure where I stuck it. Oh, well. And then square spirals, which is more geometric. And I bring that up because some of the most difficult things to quilt are things we're trying to make for dudes, right? And that's where things, Debbie, you're from Kalamazoo. I feel the urge to sing, but I'm going to refrain. Again, I'm going to refrain from doing that. Walking foot lines and square spirals are wonderful things to do in many places on a quilt, but especially in sashing if you're wanting to add a little bit more of a masculine touch. Marianne, that's a great question, which, speaking of which, since Marianne just asked a great question, if you have questions as I'm going along, drop them in the comments, and I will scroll through in a minute and answer them. This is a great, great time. Debbie, I'm going to spare us all. This is a great time for you to ask questions. That's what these videos are for, right? And then finally, pebbles, which there's a link in the blog post. I want to mention this. Karen over at Redbird Quilt Company, she does her pebbles a little bit differently than I do. So inside my classes, I teach you guys to do pebbles by doing one clockwise and one counterclockwise. And that's clockwise and counterclockwise to me. It's reverse for y'all, so just hang in there. But she talks about if you're doing them in a border, which, oh, you know what? I've got a good sample over here. So I don't have to pull that off the wall because it's pinned up. This is not in a border, but it's in a paisley, and it'll give you guys the same idea. So here you go. So pebbles like this. You could do this in a skinny border. You can also do it inside a paisley. She teaches about doing these all the same direction. So there's an interesting tutorial that I linked to on the blog that if you're curious about trying pebbles that way that you might check out. Here, I'll show you on the back side too if you're averse to red. I can be a bit averse to red at times. So there you go. Okay. And, ooh, I thought I stepped on a pin, but maybe not. Let me answer that question that Marianne asked before I drown us in more information, right? Okay, Marianne, wanted me to pause and answer, do you always heavily quilt a wall hanging? You've got a wall hanging with lots of negative space. I tend to. I'm trying to think if there's an exception to this in my house. I'm not currently thinking of any. Oh, you know what? This is an exception. Hang on. I'll show you. Okay, so typically, yes, Marianne, and here's why. It's not because I necessarily need it to be heavily quilted, but it's because wall hangings are easier to push through the bed of my domestic machine, so they are perfect practice because it takes a little bit less physical effort for more quilting. Right? So when I'm doing this, which I'll show, don't let me forget to show you guys the back of this because I'm kind of obsessed with it. But when I'm working on this quilt, this is a double bed sized quilt. Mine finished at over 80 inches square. This thing took a lot of work to quilt this week. It's why it took me most of the week because I had to do it in just little pieces because it just takes work, right? That's the reality of domestic machine quilting. We can do a big quilt on a domestic machine, but it takes effort, it takes time, it takes the willingness to pause. Oh my gosh, Lydia, I know. I just am like frantically looking around like, where are the samples? So typically I do quilt wall hangings kind of to death, which I prefer to say I quilt the life into them, which I can talk more about that in a moment as well. We'll just bunny trail our way around today, guys. But this was a time where I did not do that, and that's because the thing I wanted to practice was a walking foot spiral. So this is called Let the Light In. Let me back up. I'll show you guys the whole thing. So this is an improv piece quilt. So if you tuned into my improv video a few weeks back, you've seen this quilt. But this, it has a square spiral on it. Let me see the center. I'm going to try to find the center so y'all can see it. So it starts over here. And I did walking foot lines out. You can kind of see the texture. So not always. Lydia, we've got just about every finished quilt in this room over here. So, oh, there's one more. Let me see if there's anything of interest on here. Oh, here's some double ribbon candy. I was talking about ribbon candy. You can also double them up, just as a fun sidebar. This is my Numa block, which I really need to remake because I have mixed emotions about how this one turned out. But there we go. Okay. I love how many of y'all love red. That's fantastic. So, Marianne, did that answer your question? That was kind of, yeah. And there was something I said I was going to, oh, quilting the life into it. So if you're familiar with things like oil painting, one of the reasons it's hard to forge an oil painting is because you're not just matching colors, you're matching strokes, right? The way an artist moved the brush, and it actually like literally leaves a trail, right? You can see the way the bristles moved. And it's what creates that like lifelike effect of so many paintings. Now, there are hyper-realistic Renaissance paintings, etc., where you can't see any brushstroke, but part of what so many of us love about the Impressionist paintings and post-Impressionists is that you can really see the way the brush is moved, right? There's a lot of texture from the paint itself, and that's what quilting can do for a quilt. So that's why I say quilt the life into it, because it just makes your eye move around your quilt so much more, right? Okay. I'm just scrolling up to make sure I didn't miss any questions. Borders are so much fun, Teresa. Borders are so much fun. I love that critique, Lydia, that that's a hard question. I agree that it's a hard question. But it can be fun. Love to add quilting to plain blocks. Guys, this is wonderful. Highlight the part that looks best. You know, Susan, that's a great go-to. I can get behind that. I love that. All right. Finally, I want to talk y'all through kind of the most complicated ways that you could treat skinny borders, right? So we call this the Rockstar level. My Rockstar Status class will be relaunching in September. Rockstar Status is a very special class because it's the one that when you finish it and I see your work, we have a graduation and we celebrate the work that you've put in. It's a class that to do the work properly and to really make progress as a free motion quilter, it takes about a month of dedicated work, of spending time at your machine 4 to 5 days a week, learning all the motifs inside that class. So it's a big deal to complete the Rockstar Status class. That's why we have Rockstar Status, right? And so we do a graduation periodically for those who have taken on the challenge, taken the bull by the horns, and finished the class. When all bets are off, when things are kind of beyond the beginner free motion quilting level, we put that into Rockstar Status. And here I shared with you guys about cursive L's or wishbones, whichever one you want, is this back and forth. And this is the quilt that I tried to grab out of the closet that I do not actually have one in there, and I thought I did. This is my go-to for Sashings. Rockstar Status coming soon. That's right, Lydia. This is my go-to. Now, this falls into the Rockstar Status, the Rockstar level, because it's not included in beginner free motion quilting, but it's not a very difficult design, just as a little tip. So it's my go-to. I love it because if I'm doing grid-based quilting, it's very easy. Here, we'll pretend that these are blocks on a sash, right? I can do a motif. I can start in the upper left-hand corner, and I have a whole video on this called Efficient Quilting on Your Domestic Machine. But I can start in the upper left-hand corner and do a motif, and work my way to the upper right-hand corner. Sometimes I start bottom, but I start on the left side, right? Work my way to the upper right. I can do wishbones down in the sashing, do it again in the next block, down, do it again. And when I get to the end, do wishbones in the border and come back along the center sash and carry on. And wishbones are great because they're easy to do in lots of different directions. So they're one of my go-tos for treating skinny borders and sashing. They add enough quilting to kind of hold everything in place, but they're not so distracting that the person looking at the quilt is like, oh, the sashing, right? We don't want those transitional phrases to be distracting from the beautiful piecework you've done in your blocks, right? The other thing you could do is you could do a half feather. And this is really fun if you're doing a very traditional quilt or a quilt that either a very traditional quilt or a quilt that has fairly simple piecing that you're wanting to add an extra layer to, is to do a half feather. Now I mention a half feather because when I talk about skinny borders, I'm typically thinking under 2 inches. It's really difficult to do a full feather in that little space. It's just very dense quilting, and especially if you're working on a big quilt, that's a lot of fiddling under the harp space of your domestic machine, right? So a half feather just allows you to add a little bit of a touch without kind of going overboard. Jody, it's okay if you're struggling to answer my question. It was a hard question. I kind of just wanted to see what you guys would say. That's generally with these questions, like I ask them because I just kind of want to know y'all's thoughts. I want to engage with you. You've mostly done walking foot quilting, which is either the most basic minimum needed or echo quilting. You're excited to jump into free motion quilting. That's wonderful. Okay, I don't know if Lisa is on here. Lisa is one of the Rockstar Status graduates. And I bring Lisa up because you mentioned that you're worried about a lack of artistic ability. Lisa will, and Lydia, I don't know if you would say this too. I kind of doubt it. I feel like Lisa had this more than you did. Lisa was very much, when she started free motion quilting in like January, she was like, I'm not an artist. I don't know how this is going to go. And if you saw the quilting that Lisa shared just a few days ago with us in the Quilting Rockstars Facebook group, she's an amazing quilter. And all it took was practice. Right? You don't have to be this kind of natural born creative savant in order to free motion quilt. Practice makes progress. So I know that sometimes quilting culture puts free motion quilting up on this pedestal. It's like, oh, only the super creatives can achieve that. And that's just hogwash, right? You've got this, basically, is what I'm saying. Oh, that sounds so pretty, Lydia. If you have a picture of that, go put it in the Quilting Rockstars Facebook group. This is a, let's see, done, make a wall hanging so you can give free motion quilting a try. Yay, Susan! All right, so this is an awesome opportunity because I did not talk for super long today because, you know, skinny borders and sashings are a fairly straightforward thing. So this is a great time if you have questions about free motion quilting, if you have questions about any of my classes that I've kind of talked about and you want to know a little bit more before you check them out. If you have questions about your Moda Bake Shop quilt. I know a lot of y'all who are on here with me today are also quilting your Moda Bake Shop quilt. So if you have questions about any of those things, this is an awesome time to drop them into the comments and I will spend some time going through and answering them. In the meanwhile, while you're typing, if you have not joined the Quilting Rockstars Facebook group, please come do that. This group is for everyone. If you are a quilter, you are welcome here. It is a fun place. It is an encouraging place. All we ask is that you be an encourager, right? This is a happy place. And so this is a wonderful, safe place that as you're working through classes that you can come post pictures and say, is this looking right? Can I have some help? Here's my idea for a quilting plan. Is it gonna work, right? And you've got this whole community of now, guys, over 2,000 quilters that can encourage you and cheer for you and give you feedback and celebrate your victories and help you when you get stuck. So if you're not part of the Quilting Rockstars community yet, please click over. There's a couple of questions that I ask as you're joining the group. This is how I make sure that you're not a robot and you're not a spammer, right? Okay, so click over there. Let's see. I see questions coming. Let's see. 3 borders on that floral top you post, 2.5, 4, and 9. Teresa, you're gonna have so much fun. While we're talking about borders, Teresa, since you mentioned that 9-inch border, this is kind of the opposite extreme of this week's blog post, but for something that big, consider breaking it into a couple of different borders. I did that a little bit here to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. See how I took my walking foot and I echoed the seam and then I did my switchbacks? And maybe not, maybe you already have a plan to like take that 9-inch border by the horns and you are like good to go. And if that's true, go for it. But if you're looking at it and you're feeling overwhelmed, think about breaking it into a couple of different borders. So something that I did recently so there was, I think, a 6-inch border and there was a 1-inch finished sashing on the quilt, but there was not like a skinny border and then a wide border. So what I did is I created a skinny border with my walking foot. Well, I did on the long arm, so I used a ruler, but on your domestic, you would do it well, Teresa, I have a whole class on how to make a quilting plan. So if you need help making plans, I got you, girl. But I took my ruler or my walking foot and I created a faux 1-inch border that I quilted identically to the sashing of the quilt. So I did wishbones and then wishbones, and then I had, I think, like 5 inches left that I did a feather in, and that felt a lot more manageable than this big old 6-inch border out there. So, food for thought. Jody, you know, I am learning more and more about how to combine my walking foot with free motion quilting, and it's like opened up a whole new set of possibilities, which, on that note, this is a great opportunity for me to flip this over for you guys, because that's exactly what I did on the center of this quilt. Dun, da, da, da. Let's see. I gotta try to get it so I can see you guys and you can see the quilt. Let's see. Almost there. Ha! This is like a bad puppet show. Here we go. Da, da, da. There's a picture of this on the Facebook page too. So if you're like, yeah, HollyAnne, that's crappy, I can't see that, it's fine. But the part that I did with the walking foot is right here. You see those little grid lines? So where the wishbones are, or not the wishbones, the ribbon candy, those were log cabins. So I took those log cabin lines with my walking foot and brought them into a grid and created a secondary star in the middle of this kind of embellished sawtooth star. And I could not be more pleased with the results. I really couldn't. It came out exactly how I'd envisioned it, and these blocks were, those were just plain blocks. And when combined with the intricacies of this log cabin, I was like, that feels like a lot of kind of naked 4 inches there. So I created that same shape, allowed everyone to interlock. If you're wanting to learn feathers, this feather flower is a great place to start, by the way. And then I did feathers in the negative space, which took quite a bit of effort on my domestic, I'm not gonna lie. So, yes, okay. Yay, Teresa! Working your way through the classes. I love it. I love it. All right, guys, any more questions for me today? I'm so glad that you joined me. You never installed your walking foot. Lydia, since when have you been nervous about anything? Honey, go screw it on. It's not that hard. I've known Lydia for a while now, guys. I can give her a hard time. You need to feel a vision. I know. Wouldn't that be fun? Like open studio day. Da, da, da. Come pet the quilts. That would be a pet the quilts day instead of a petting zoo. That would be great. I have very mixed emotions that it's tradition at quilt shows to not touch the quilts. I know why we do that, but it's so difficult because I just want to just run my hands down them. Winifred, hey girl, how you doing? All right, y'all, so bottom line, yes, technology doesn't like you. Lydia, okay, hang on, where's my walking foot? What machine do you have, Lydia? Okay, here's your this is an impromptu walking foot lesson if you're new to this, okay? So this is the foot. This part goes on your screw just like any other foot, right? So the screw goes through this part. You just, okay? And on mine, I have another one that's a little bit simpler. Okay, so here's two different walking feet. This is my Eversewn foot. This is my Singer foot, okay? So on my Singer, you know, there's the little, like the needle screw that's on the right side, and you just lay this bar on top of that screw. So when the needle goes up and down, so does your foot. See, watch. See how the foot is moving? Okay. It's the same thing with this, but on this one, it goes around the screw. So as your needle goes up and down, those little feed dogs move. See them? They do a little dance. Okay. So Lydia, now that you've learned how to install your walking foot, go do it. Okay. Impromptu lesson to the side. Pat, I'm so glad you asked. Next week, we're talking about these 9 patch crosses. And the week after that, we'll be talking about the granny squares. So we're taking this one round at a time, which reminds me, the reason that I'm not sitting at my machine today is because I'm going to quilt these skinny borders as I get to them. And the reason is because when I'm working on my domestic, especially for a big quilt, I try to work from the inside out. If there's any ease in those seams, any ease in that fabric, I want it to go out towards the edges. Because if I go in right now and I quilt this border down while we're talking, and then I come in here next week and I'm trying to quilt this, if there's any ease in this whatsoever, then I'm going to end up with puckers along that seam line, and that doesn't look very good. Sometimes puckers happen, but we try to avoid them, right? This is less than ideal. So I will be quilting these borders as I get to them so that all the ease can get pushed out, because the easiest place for me to deal with extra fabric is in this big border, right? I can use either switchbacks or ruler work or walking foot work or a very dense quilting motif and lots of starch to deal with any extra fabric once I get out here. But if I'm dealing with it in here, I'm more likely to end up with puckers and bubbles, and I find that frustrating. So I'll be working my way out. So those granny squares are coming up. Don't worry, I'll have a bunch of ideas, which I noticed that Dory Hruska just hopped on with us. Dory has a wonderful book called Making Connections, and it's all about continuous curve designs. And that will be one of the things that we talk about a little bit with those granny squares. So if you're already interested in continuous curves, you know, the do-do-do-do-do. Okay, anyway, enough air drawing. Then Dory's book is a wonderful resource. And when we get to that in a couple of weeks, I'll be sure that there's a link to her book in my blog post. Just FYI. Yes, Lori, I did use my spray based on this giant quilt. My homemade spray based recipe, which you can find a link on my blog, is holding this whole thing together. And that's why one of you asked last week, where the heck are the pins? Well, here's one, here's another. There's one back here, and there's one over here. I only put them about every 12 to 18 inches when I use the homemade spray base. They're more there for like psychology than for actually holding the quilt in place, right? Let's see, Dory, what did you say? Oh, thanks, Dory. So yes, this is all spray basted together. It's working like a charm. You will notice as we get closer to the edge, there's a few more pins out at the edge, and that's because as I'm crunching and crinkling and shoving this thing through my machine, those edges are a little bit more likely to peel up, right? So there's a few more pins over there to hold everybody stable. Let's see, homemade spray base, whole granny square quilt. You need to do, oh, Deborah, that's gonna be so fun. I kind of want to make a whole granny square quilt, except that they take forever to make. Like this border just about did me. I almost quit after that border. I'm not even gonna lie. I just got a message asking about the pattern for this. If you go to Moda Bake Shop and search, excuse me, Camp Oda May or Choose Your Own Adventure Quilt Along, this is a free pattern. Also, if you go to my blog for today, there's a link in there directly to the pattern for all of this. This was a free pattern from Moda Bake Shop this summer. You have 2 machines. Lydia, try it. Like, worst case scenario, it doesn't work and you go, oops. Yeah, okay. Quilt your quilt, yes. And this quilt, I didn't mention this. This is Modern Birds in the Air by Frances Dowell. She wrote Birds in the Air, which is a wonderful little quilting novel. And what's so exciting about this is next week's giveaway is going to be Frances's new book, Margaret Goes Modern. So if you love quilt fiction and you love reading, or if you know Frances, she also does the Off Kilter Quilt podcast. Next week's giveaway is going to be compliments of Frances, and we'll be talking about her work just a little bit at the beginning and end of our video next week. So she wrote this pattern. It was in testing a couple of years ago. I don't know if it's actually been published, but to give her credit for that design work. All right, let me see if there's any final questions. You're quilting on a long arm. Yay, Robin. I have a long arm. Do you recommend working from the middle to the borders? No, typically I work the way that I read. So top left, across, well, and then sometimes I go backwards. So I do like a snake, typically, on my long arm. If I were quilting this on the long arm, I would potentially still do that, which makes it a little bit harder if you're trying to quilt along with us. So let me try to talk you through this real quick. Now, if you choose to do it this way on your long arm, it will make it harder to follow along with this in real time, but all of this is staying archived on my blog, so it's okay. So what I would potentially do if I were working this on my long arm is load it, and I would work in stripes of the borders, right, until I got to the center, and quilt the center, and then I would probably roll back, and Dory, if you have thoughts on how you would tackle a quilt like this, let me know, and then I would roll back, and I would do the side stripes, right, because I did only the horizontal bits before. I do the side stripes on each side, and that's going to involve some rolling back and forth. And then I would do the bottom the same way, so work my way back out. And the thought with that being, again, that you're moving the ease kind of out to those edges as you go. So down to the center and then out to the sides and then down to the bottom. The other thing you could do is you could baste it, so do big old basting stitches to hold everybody in place in order to do the middle. And then you could do the middle out and work in circles. Pretty much with a medallion quilt on a long arm, no matter how you slice it, you're going to do a lot of rolling back and forth, which can be scary if it's your first time doing it, but it's not nearly as scary as I think sometimes people make it feel. Does that make sense? Let me know if that helps. Jody says, yes. Okay, so quilt fiction. So a novel that involves quilts and quilters, right? And she also has a whole website, this quiltfiction.com, of her books that she's written. And she has a podcast, Friendship Album, oh shoot, I'm going to get the date wrong, 1933, I think. Frances, I'm so sorry. I just was telling Frances this week about how I never say the full name of your podcast because I always get the date wrong. But it's a free audiobook, basically, on podcast. Oh, wonderful. Let's see. Work left to right on the long arm. HollyAnne shows up in reverse in these videos. Oh, yes. Was that, yes. Okay, Winifred, thank you for clarifying that because I'm using my selfie camera, so everything I do, it's a mind bender. What can I say? So another quote. You didn't use any pins on your on Ringo Lake. Spray basted with the recipe and it was fine. Woohoo! Yeah, Jody, was it you who said you were going to use a paint roller next time to put the spray baste on? I thought about that with this quilt and I was like, oh, I should have bought a paint roller. Yeah, because crawling around on the floor putting all the baste on this one, my hand is still sore from that squirt bottle. Yeah, okay. Robin says, that helps a lot. You started the Moda Bake Shop quilt later than everyone, so you're trying to catch up. Oh, perfect. Well, if you're still piecing, then that's absolutely fine. That you're going to be behind us as we're quilting along, right? And the other thing, and many of you have realized this already, but if you are tuning into this and you did not make the Moda Bake Shop quilt along, these are all still units that we use in quilts all the time, like the granny squares, the flying geese, a big old star, right? So this is a very applicable series even if you didn't quilt this particular, or didn't piece this particular quilt, right? All right, guys, let's see. I'm making sure I don't see any final questions. I missed a couple last week, so I just want to make sure that I have caught them. All right, I think so. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Again, if you found this helpful, if you're excited about this series, if you have quilting friends on Facebook or a quilting group that you're a part of, please click the share button and share this video over so they can see it too. It's just a great way to bring people into our community and to be able to learn and encourage together, which is just something I'm crazy passionate about. Oh, Dory weighed in on the long arm thing. Let's see. You'd quilt in rows, do the side borders as you go. Yes, it would depend on what you're doing. Roll back up. Perfect. Yay, Dory. Thank you. Thank you for weighing in on that. I'm glad you were here to offer some insight. Yay. All right, guys, make sure you've answered the question in the caption so that you can be entered to win a copy of my ebook, Anxious to Adventurous, 10 Weeks to Fabulous Free Motion Quilting, which is a great little self-paced, self-study way to play around with free motion quilting, but it's also a wonderful resource when you're, like, I don't know what to quilt on this one. You can pull it out and flip through and say, oh, I haven't done ribbon candy in a while. I've been doing all switchbacks. Let me do that and just change things up. As always, there's links to my classes in the bottom of the caption of this video. Again, I'm so excited to announce that How to Make a Quilting Plan is live once again. For those of you that have taken this class, if you have feedback about things you learned or enjoyed and you want to drop that in the comments for folks to see, that would be amazing. I love How to Make a Quilting Plan because it takes all the anxiety out of quilting your quilts, right? So there's one thing to take intro or beginner and learn the motifs, but even once you have your little toolbox of quilting motifs, sometimes it's like, I know how to do a ribbon candy, but I don't know where to do it. And right after people quit saying they're scared of free motion quilting, they start telling me, I'm scared that I don't know what to quilt where. I'm scared I'm gonna ruin my quilt because I'm gonna spend a bunch of hours quilting it and then decide that I don't like that, right? And that's what this class is for. This class tells you what to quilt where, and not in a prescriptive way, but in a here's some ideas, inspiration, practice opportunities kind of way, so that you can have a plan before you start. If you make all the decisions before you begin, and that's exactly what I did with this star. I drew this on paper before I quilted on the quilt. So when it came time to put it on my quilt, I didn't have to feel anxious about doing it because I already knew I liked it because I'd drawn it out on paper, right? And I can't promise that you'll never, ever, ever have to unpick because you don't like something, but I can at least cut down on that a whole lot. So by making a plan on paper, on purpose, you've done all the hard work and you get to just enjoy quilting your quilts. And you absolutely 100% can learn all the motifs and all the quilting plan skills you ever need to finish all of your own quilts. I believe that with my whole heart. That's why I'm here every week helping you guys, showing up together, and y'all are just, you're fabulous. Every single one of you has the ability to be a rock star, and I can't emphasize that enough because that little voice in our head likes to tell us how much we can't do things. So I'm here to speak loud and clear and say, you can do it. And I'm cheering for you. Speaking of which, if you are part of the Quilting Rockstars Facebook group, which I really hope is every single one of you by now, I'll be inside the Quilting Rockstars Facebook group tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern to continue quilting Lanterns of Hope. This was our summer quilt along together this year. You can see a teeny tiny piece of it when I hold up anyway. Last week we did some paisleys. And honestly, I don't remember off the top of my head what we're doing this week, so allow me to look. That giant sound was the quilt hitting my long arm. The frame, not the machine. Please don't panic. We're doing wood grain this week. Yes, I love wood grain quilting. Wood grain is a fun motif, so make sure that you hop inside the group so that you can join in tomorrow. We call it Saturday, tomorrow's not Saturday, String and Story Social Hour on Friday nights. You can bring a drink, bring a snack, bring a friend, bring your quilt. Even if you didn't quilt Lanterns of Hope, just bring your current whip and tune in, and I will be yakking and giving tips and answering questions and just generally hanging out with you guys for at least an hour. It's a lot of fun. It's like the highlight of my Friday night, my wild Friday night in with all of you. So I'll see you then. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you back here next week. Have a great, wonderful Thursday. Bye, y'all.